Now let's talk about how to solve inequalities. Our directions are solve, write your answer in set builder notation, then graph your answer. So if I look at number 1, I have negative 5z minus 6, all divided by 8 is less than 8. Now we saw when we solved equations, the first thing we need to do when we have a fraction is get rid of the denominator. And to get rid of that denominator, we multiply by the least common denominator. In this case, our denominator is 8, so I'm going to multiply both sides of the equation by 8. Remember, if it helps, you can write it as 8 over 1 to remind you that those 8's are going to cancel out. So we'll just be left with the numerator on the left-hand side, negative 5z minus 6, is less than 64. Now I'm going to solve this like I would an equation to get that z by itself. So I'm going to undo that minus 6 by adding 6 to both sides. That gives me negative 5z is less than 70. Now I need to undo that multiplication with the negative 5 times z. So I'm going to divide both sides by negative 5. The negative 5's cancel out to give me z, and 70 divided by negative 5 gives me negative 14. Now notice I divided both sides by a negative number, that negative 5. When I do that, I flip my inequality symbol. So my answer is z is greater than negative 14. So to write my answer in set builder notation, I use my bracket. I use the variable that I solved for, so I solved for z, my line for such that z is greater than negative 14. Then I also need to graph my answer on the number line. So I'm going to draw my number line. I absolutely have to have negative 14 on my number line. Then if I look, that inequality symbol is greater than. There's no equal to underneath it, so I'm going to have an open circle. And because it's greater than, I want the numbers bigger than negative 14 or to the right of it. If I look at number 2, I have 4 times the quantity m plus 1 plus 2 is greater than or equal to 3m plus 6. So I'm going to solve this just like I would an equation. I'm going to get rid of those parentheses first by distributing. So 4 times m gives me 4m. 4 times 1 gives me 4. And then I'm going to bring down everything else. Now I need to combine like terms. Remember, we can only combine like terms on one side of the equation or inequality. So on this left-hand side, I can combine positive 4 and positive 2, which gives me positive 6. And I'll bring that 4m down. On the right-hand side, there's no like terms, so I just drag down the 3m and the 6. Now I have variables on both sides, so I want to get the variables to one side. I'm going to get rid of this positive 3m by subtracting 3m from both sides. Make sure you subtract it from the 4m, that other like term on the left-hand side. So that's going to give me 1m, or just plain old m, plus 6 is greater than or equal to 6, because my positive 3m and negative 3m cancel out. Then I have to get that m by itself, so I undo adding 6 with subtracting by 6, and it gives me m is greater than or equal to 0. To write this in set builder notation, I open with a bracket, write m such that m is greater than or equal to 0. When I draw this on my number line, because m is compared to 0, I have to have 0 on my number line. It's greater than or equal to, so because I have that equal to line, I have a closed circle, and that greater than tells me I want numbers bigger than 0 or to the right of 0. If I look at number 3, I have 3k over 10 plus 1 is less than or equal to 1/5 minus k over 10. So I have another problem with fractions. Remember, to get rid of fractions, I multiply through by the least common denominator. In this case, the least common denominator between 5 and 10, those numbers in the bottom where the denominator, is 10, because it's the smallest number that every number can evenly go into from those denominators. So I'm going to take 10, or 10 over 1, and multiply it with every single term. So I'm going to keep those original terms in black, and I'm going to be multiplying this LCD 10, or 10 over 1, in green. Okay, so now I have all my multiplication written out. Remember, the point of this multiplication is to cancel out our denominators. So in this first term, the 10s do completely cancel out, and we're just left with 3k. Then we have 10 times 1, because there's no denominator with 1, so we're just left with 10. Is less than or equal to. Here, the 10 and the 5 do cancel out, but 5 goes into 10 2 times. So when we multiply, we're going to have 2. Minus, and then our 10s totally cancel out, so we'll just have k. Now I'm just going to dive in and solve this. I have variables on both sides, so I'm going to add k to both sides. Remember, when there's no number or no coefficient with that k, that there's really a 1 there. So I'm going to have 4k plus 10 is less than or equal to 2. I need to subtract 10 from both sides, and that's going to give me 4k is less than or equal to negative 8. To get that k by itself, I divide both sides by 4, so I'll end up with k is less than or equal to negative 2. One thing I want to point out, notice I did not have to flip that inequality symbol because I divided both sides by a positive number. So that means that inequality symbol stays the same. Okay. Now I need to write my answer in set builder notation. I was solving for k, and I got that k is less than or equal to negative 2. If I graph this on the number line, I absolutely have to have negative 2 on there because it's what k is being compared to. I need it to be a closed circle because of that less than or equal to, and because it's less than, I need that arrow to go to the left.